one-toed sloth has no tail, but they have the same number of vertebrae from end to end. So a two-toed sloth has all those extra vertebrae between his hips and his shoulders. So a two-toed sloth is like a slinky, a three-toed sloth is more like an owl. So if you take one of the pieces of food and you just lead him around in a circle like this, you will see that he can turn his body about, you gotta pull a little more way, drag him around like that. You will see that he can turn his hips almost 180 out from his shoulders. If you lead him in a circle around, he'll reach all the way back to about here.
He's like, you're going to give that.
Yeah, he also has some pretty good core strength that he can hike out like one of these guys on the poles do. But he can turn till his shoulders are almost 180 out from his hips. And those are the big, and the two-toed sloths are somewhat bigger and somewhat quicker than a three-toed sloth. If you're reading online, Google, Wikipedia, whatever, there's very, very contradictory information on sloths, depending on what website you are reading. And some of that, you know, they use the word sloth generically, and there's Linnaeus two-toed sloths, there's Hoffman's two-toed sloths, there's three-toed sloths, there's a number of kinds of sloths. So, you know, they kind of just use the word sloth as a blanket statement, but there's some pretty big differences between some of them. So sloths are slow. Sloths are famously slow. We all know that. But sloths are slow in ways that you don't think about a sloth being slow. So sloths are slow not only in their movement, they're slow in their digestion, their metabolism, their metabolic processes. They are slow in every way that an animal can be slow. And if you watch him, as he reaches out, that's more slow, but then he can just pull back in, right? Because this is his stress state, relaxed state. And so similarly, he can hang from this branch for days, right? If we were going to hang from this, you know, we can remember from PE class many years ago for most of us, that a minute is a long time to do a two-arm hang. That's because for us, our stress or exertion state is this. Our relaxed state is that. For him, his relaxed state is this. This is exerting no energy. So when he reaches out to you, this is his exertion state, is straightening out like that. And you'll see that he just goes back to relaxed right away. It is so true that he is exerting no energy to hang on this branch that if a sloth dies hanging from a tree, it will not necessarily fall. It can continue to hang there dead for days or weeks, and until something rots or something knocks him off of the branch. So, and particularly for those watching online, sometimes people think that this is the sloth's whole environment. It is not. The sloth's room is in there. That's 2 stories tall, has branches and hammocks and places for him to hang, places for him to sleep and everything else. He's got his inside, he's got his outside. This is not the sloth's room. This is where we do our sloth encounters. So they digest their food really slowly. So the first studies on how slowly a sloth digests its food, they put some 3mm glass beads into some sloth's food and just waited to see how long it took them to come out the other end. And that was 61 to 64 days.
Oh, wow.
So that was the beginning of the idea on exactly how slowly a sloth digests its food. No one seriously believes that anymore. It just seems that glass beads don't move through the digestive system the way that food does. They have a complicated digestive system. Their esophagus goes down around their stomach and then dumps in again when it comes after it loops around. They have a multi-chambered stomach, but and so they're doing a lot to their food because they're eating really low quality food, so they do a lot in the digestive process. But the next study on how long it takes a sloth to digest its food, they put some durable dyes on some various types of food and waited to see how long it took the dyes to come out. Much better methodology. And that worked out to be between 18 and 30-ish days. So that's where we believe the sloth digestion is now. So
it always comes down out of the trees and things to go to the bathroom? Or?
Yes, always. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So the sloth digests its food really slowly, but it eats a crazy amount of food. So a sloth eats 10% of his body weight every single day. So eating 10% of his body weight every single day, and yet going to the bathroom only 3 or 4 times a month. Only once in 7 to 10 days. You can hang that on one of those hooks if you like. Over there.
Oh.
They have animals running around on this floor. So you never know. But so anyway, only goes to the bathroom once in 7 to 10 days. That's solid and liquid both. They don't even tinkle in between trips down to go to the bathroom. So they're eating 10% of their body weight every single day. So that's sort of a ho-hum throwaway number until you put it to human perspectives. I weigh 180. That would be me rolling up into Outback and saying, give me 18 of the 16-ounce porterhouse steaks and plowing them all down every single day. Obviously, that couldn't work one day, much less 10 in a row. So if he eats 10% of his body weight every single day and goes to the bathroom only once in 10 days, you might suppose that he would drop 100% of his natural body mass when he went to the bathroom.
Yeah.
He doesn't, but he does drop a third. So he's metabolizing 2/3 of what he eats and eliminating 1/3. So again, ho-hum number till you consider that I weigh 180, little quick math, and would leave you horrified, right? So, yeah, bag of dog food in a 5-gallon bucket's what we're talking about there. So, yeah, we would need some new plumbing systems, right? Maybe that's the way, I just got back from Turkey. Maybe that's why they have those toilets the way they do.
Just right over the floor.
Yeah, pretty much, right? So, anyhow, so when the sloth is in the tops of the trees, he is entirely safe from predators with the exception of eagles. The reason that he's safe from predators is this sloth only weighs about 15 pounds. So he can go very much further out to the ends of the branches than a predator large enough to threaten his life can go. So if he walks all the way out and then the predator tries to chase him to the point that the branch breaks and they both fall 80 to 100 feet to the rainforest floor, this slinky-legged sloth will survive the drop. The cat will be laying there dead and the sloth will go,
Now I gotta climb all the way.
and back up the tree he will go at no particular rate of speed. And there are a couple of websites, and of course I don't know this, but there's a couple websites that say sloths may fall as often as, a couple times a month. And it just doesn't hurt them because, and obviously they're not falling onto concrete.
Sure.
And in his room in there where it's taller, there's a net that keeps, if he happened to fall, the net would catch him, not the concrete floor. So anyhow, they're soft, they're safe when they're in the tops of the trees, and yet they come down the same tree, same side of the tree every single time to use the bathroom. So there has to be a pretty good reason for the sloth to risk his life to go to the bathroom, right?
Yeah.
Because that is the normal cause of death of a sloth, is coming down the tree to go to the bathroom and being caught by a predator. So and if you want to know exactly how a sloth goes to the bathroom, you can scroll back through some of our social medias and find the one that the cover page says sloth potty time, and it will show you how the sloth goes to the bathroom. And so anywho, comes down the same tree, same side of the tree, goes to the bathroom on the same waste pile that he always goes on. The reason for that is the sloth-moth symbiotic relationship. Now it's a little bit Dr. Seuss, as I try to say sloth, moth, moss, moss, moth, sloth several times fast. So sloth comes down the tree, and he gets his hiney right to the ground and kabam! Brings the thunder, as you said.
Yeah.
And he gets his hiney right to the ground. The three-toed sloth takes it a step further, and he uses that 3 vertebra tail to stand there and dig a little hole in the middle of his pile before he lets it rip. So when they're down, the moths, and a sloth has about 150 moths living in his fur at any given time in the wild, not here, praise God. And as he comes down the tree, the moths go off of the sloth into the waste pile and lay their eggs. So from the last time that he came down, those eggs are now larvae. From 2 times ago, those larvae are now moths, and the new moths come up onto the sloth. Row, row, row your boat. There's always new moths every time that he comes down the tree. The 3-toed sloth has the moths even more densely on him than a 2-toed sloth does, because as he's down there digging his hole in the poo, the larva can crawl up his tail onto him, as well as the moths flying up onto him. So he has the moths even more densely in his fur than the 2-toed sloth does. But the symbiotic, meaning beneficial to both sides of the equation, where parasitic would be beneficial to one side, neutral or harmful to the other side. So the benefit to the moth is that the sloth is the living environment of the moth. There is a type of moth in the world called a sloth moth that lives nowhere in the world except in the fur and in the poo of a sloth.
That's a shitty job.
Yeah, there you go. Literally. So the benefit to the moth is that the sloth is the living environment of the moth. So the sloth will live its whole life on the moth will live the whole life on the sloth. The only reasons that he is going to leave are to drink water pooled up in a leaf of a nearby leaf, and to get off the sloth to lay eggs in the waste pile when he comes down the tree. So the sloth is the living environment of the moth, and the moss and algae in the sloth's fur are the food source of the moths. The benefit to the sloth is that the sloth digests his food by a bacterial process. Now he's got, obviously he's got big, huge teeth. If you were an evolutionist and you dug up the skeleton of this animal, you could come up with some pretty wild theories about this. Probably light speed, huge teeth, big claws, fearsome predator, but he's not, obviously. Yeah. You can only tell so much from bones. But anyhow, so he's got some good choppers, he's got some good chewing, he's got all kinds of work going on in his multi-chambered stomach, but he's getting really poor quality food.
Right.
We have the same chewing, we have mechanical motion of our stomach, we've got stomach acids, but at the end of the day, our food gets to the point of absorbable by an enzymatic process. We have enzymes that break our food down the rest of the way. His gets there by a bacterial process. Now, we also have helpful gut bacteria that will last for all of our lives unless we take a long course of antibiotics. And if we do take a long course of antibiotics, we're going to need to run down to GNC and get some live culture probiotics or maybe some Greek yogurt to fix us back up. He has no access to either of those in the rainforest. So the way that his bacteria colony replenishes is the moths. So as the sloth grooms himself, he licks up a certain amount of the waste of the moths and a certain amount of the moths themselves. The moths and the waste of the moths are the source of the bacteria that make the sloth digest its food. And this is a known fact. If a sloth's moth colony dies out, the sloth will die of starvation. This is not hypothetical. This is a known fact.
How are you doing it?
So his environment is always 79, 80 degrees all of the time. And what kills our bacteria colony is antibiotics. What kills his bacteria colony is cold temperature. So by carefully maintaining his temperature and his humidity all of the time, his bacteria colony will last throughout his life. And then, as an animal keeper, you have to be something of a poopologist. So we carefully examine his waste every time that he goes to the bathroom, and that tells us a lot about what's going on inside his gut. And if we had to, we could adjust his diet accordingly. And if it was really bad, we could give him probiotics. But we have never had to do anything more than just adjust his diet if he's getting too much or too little sugar. Sort of like a baby, if they get thrush, cut out every kind of sugar there is for them. That's, explosion of a bacteria colony. So other benefit to the moth that is less provable is that if you see wild pictures of a wild sloth, they are nasty looking creatures with all the black and green mold and moss and everything growing in their fur. And sorry, I lost my train while they're running around going upstairs. There's people.
What's the nature of the
Camel Congo.
green?
Yeah, so the green and brown and black disguises them from eagles is the theory. So all the dark colors in their fur helps them be disguised from the eagles, which is the only predator they're subject to in the tops of the trees. So slow in their digestion, slow in their metabolism, slow in their metabolic processes. So they are metabolizing the vast majority of the food that they're eating, but what they're eating is almost all leaves, almost all cellulose, very low in nutritional value. So his energy budget is super low. Some examples of that is he moves really slowly. He doesn't have the energy to move faster. A female can only nurse their babies with milk for about 3 to 6 weeks. They do not have the energy budget to make milk for any longer than that. The babies do start eating solid food on day 3 or 4 of their lives, but the mothers will nurse them with milk for about 3 to 6 weeks. You can stand really close to him like this, and he'll get down to get nose to nose with you, and you can get a pretty nice selfie. But especially if you're as tall as you guys are, a little further reach for me.
Yeah.
But
You gonna do it? Watch that snot driven.
Get slow snot.
Oh, Sloths, I don't care. Where you going, buddy? You're trying to go over there.
He's like, I got this room the other day, I'm gonna pull it off again.
Trying to go back in that room again?
There's a girl in there.
He doesn't care about the girl, he cares about the hammock. He went in there and cruised all around. And we haven't talked so much about his vision yet, but there's branches painted on the ceiling in there. And he was like, trying to grab the branches painted on the ceiling. But so in the wild, they theorize that a sloth can live for about 20 years. But the normal cause of death for a sloth is, being caught by a predator. They are a prey animal, not a predator animal. So, dying of natural causes for a sloth is dying of being caught by a predator. In captivity, obviously, there are no predators. There is no cold weather to kill them. And so in captivity, sloths live much, much longer than they do in the wild. So it's hard to say exactly how long a sloth is capable of living because very few people have ever seen one die of old age. What can be said for sure is that the 2 sloth breeders that I'm pretty familiar with each have a female sloth that is over 35 years old and still reproducing. So you can't say for sure that this is true of a sloth, but it's true of other mammals. That most female mammals don't reproduce in the last half to third of their lifespan. So that would suggest that those sloths could still live a really long time. There was one in the, Smithsonian Zoo?
In Germany. For the Jan that made it to 54.
There was one that lived to be 54 in Germany. Weren't you telling me Smithsonian had
Smithsonian had one that went to 49.
Smithsonian had one that lived 49 years in captivity. So, yes, he's not going to fall. Yeah, he's all about getting back into that other room. Oh, he's got hammocks. He's got.
They're not that hammock.
It's a different hammock. Something different.
I came
like
like
going
going
to-
one time and one of these was hanging on my front door.
Oh yeah,
And when we lived in Panama,
cool. It's like going to a hotel, I guess.
except
Yeah,
I was
something
on this
different.
thing.
Let's see.
Say what?
I was on this,
Oh yeah, why were you in Panama?
my dad was in the military.
All right.
We were stationed at 4 years.
So there's a fair amount of websites out there that say that sloths hate to be petted. Obviously, you can, especially when you see the next one, you can see that that is not a true thing. In the wild, that's entirely true. Most wild animals hate to be petted. Go try to pet a deer and see how that works out for you, right? And there are a number of websites that tell you that it is harmful to a sloth to be petted. And again, in the wild, that is entirely true. I completely agree with that. But in captivity, it's a completely different story. So in the wild, the moths and beetles and moss and algae that are all in their fur are an entire biome. And when you go petting a wild sloth, it is going to mess up the sloth. Don't pet a wild sloth. Also, the government of Costa Rica puts out a fair amount of information about never ever pet a sloth. Because there are people in Costa Rica who will go grab a wild sloth out of the woods and set up a roadside stand and try to get tourists to pet it. And so in that circumstance, I completely agree that you should not pet a sloth. Our sloths are multiple generations of captive bred. We do not support people taking sloths out of the wild. We do not want people to go petting wild sloths. But these are multiple generations of captive bred, sort of like your house cat. If you have your kitten that grew up in your living room and you take it and throw it out in the woods, it is going to be brief. And similarly, if you brought a feral cat into your living room, it is going to be ugly.
Yeah.
So same thing with these. These are captive bred, multiple generations. And especially when you see Zoe here in a minute, actively seeks human attention and companionship all of the time. She hangs around my wife's neck for multiple hours a day. The newest baby came from the same breeder that Zoe came from. and he similarly is people-oriented from birth forward. He's got a genius system that he has a clicker and click, click, click. I'm going to take the baby, but it will be back. The mothers are used to it. Doesn't stress them out, and therefore it doesn't stress the babies out. So the babies are being held from 2 weeks old forward every single day of their lives. But they stay with their mother until the mother weans them, and then they go to their forever home. How that works in the wild is when the mothers are still with the babies, but they're done drinking milk because they're teaching them how to survive in the world. So he's saying, well, guys, it's about time to head back to my room. Is it time to head back to the room? Hey, baby.
Oh.
Yeah. All right, so if you guys would like to see how he goes into his room and what his room looks like, I'm happy to show it to you. Hey, Flash, come here, buddy. Flash.
He opened the door for you.
Yeah, we're not going to the hotel. We're going to the house. Hey, Bubba.
He's okay, like.
Hey,
You making up
Flash.
food?
So Flash vision is horrible.
Sure.
They have rod monochromacy, which means they have all rod cells, no cone cells, no color vision whatsoever, and their vision is overall just terrible. So you're welcome to step in there. You can see the way that he goes up. As long as you haven't come from a farm, it may have animal waste on your shoes. But barring that, you're welcome to step in there and see how he goes. He moves quicker than you might think when he gets ready to go up to his hammock, and he's going to take a nice long nap.